Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another Silicon Labs Technology podcast. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Nick has hijacked another one of Kyle's podcasts. Where is Kyle? Well, today you're almost right. I have not actually hijacked a podcast. Kyle is in fact busy doing some preparation for Works With 21. This is the industry-leading conference designed for developers and IoT gurus alike. The conference brings together semiconductor vendors, entrepreneurs, design partners, technology partners, ecosystem vendors, and more. It's either that or he's got man flu, and I'm not sure which one it is, but he tells me it's Works With, so let's go with that. If you've never heard of Works With, it is actually a leading event that we hold in September, and we most certainly encourage you to turn up for it. But one of the guys I'm looking forward to being there is with me today on this podcast. He is the Z-Wave Executive Director, but he's also a Director for Strategic Partnerships here at Silicon Labs. We have got Mitchell Klein on the line, but as you know, Mitchell is way too formal for me, so Mitch, how are you doing?
Yes, it would be Mitch, and I'm actually fabulous today because I get to do this with the famous Nick Dutton. So I'm really thrilled about this. Sorry, Kyle, maybe we'll talk next time.
I'm famous for all the wrong reasons, though. That's the problem. I'm sure you'll agree there. Anyway, how long has it been that I've known you? I feel like it's been an enormous amount of time, and I can't even tell you where you and I met.
I think it more than likely was in a pub somewhere.
Yeah, maybe.
Actually, I think it really was. It was probably in a pub somewhere at CES in the last couple of years. I would think that's where it was.
Well, for sure, pubs is where all the real business gets done at CES.
Clearly.
I have definitely been in one of the two of those meetings. But you've been working with the Z-Wave guys for as long as I can remember, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your history there. But just so you understand my history with Z-Wave, that also is quite long in the tooth now. I mean, I was working with Zigbee as competition back in the Zensys days. And of course, it's gone through some major innovations and major changes since then. Maybe you could talk to how that's happened and what you see has happened in the Z-Wave ecosystem and its evolution.
Well, you know what? Let me take us back a little bit first. And let's answer the first part of that about, how long I've been with Z-Wave. Short memory, perhaps, but it's been about 6 years. And you're right, when the Z-Wave and the Alliance were first acquired by Silicon Labs, it was like walking through enemy territory, especially since, I'm in Boston. And as we all know, there's an office here in Boston that was the Zigbee location. It probably still is the Zigbee place. So it was very interesting. And let me just take it back a bit, because way back when I was with a company called Universal Remote Control, also known as URC, one of the charges I was given, along with a couple of other people, was to take URC out of the remote control business and get into the whole home control. Now, this is going back a few years and long before smart and home were ever in a sentence together. And I worked with the Korean, we were a Korean engineering team, and we wanted to come up with a way to actually control a lot of devices. And I was hearing a lot about Zigbee, right? Zigbee everything. So I would go back to the engineering team and say, let's work on the Zigbee platform. And they would go back to their team in Korea and come back, and he'd say to me, no, we can't do Zigbee. And it took a while before I finally got the COO to actually explain to me that whenever I said, let's do Zigbee, the response was, which Zigbee? Which Zigbee was the thing. And so I went back and said, okay, I can't figure this out. So I went to a buddy of mine who just happened to have been a guy named Bill Scheffler, who happened to have been with an organization called Sigma Designs. And he came in and told me, let's just do Z-Wave. And to me, again, I'm very simple thinking. If I'm going to have confusion over which Zigbee, or I can use something that only has one flavor of Z-Wave, I said, okay, let's just do Z-Wave. And that was my introduction to Z-Wave. And that was why the guys in Boston really didn't want to talk to me when I first came in, when we first got acquired. So Anyway, so what happened from there was at some point, I just felt like I wasn't making an impact on URC. I think a lot of you people have that same experience where you're working with a company and at some point you just think you've worked yourself out. And so I just happened to been sitting up in bed one night, which is something that one should never do with a laptop. And I'm sure everyone listening to this does exactly that. And just on LinkedIn, and something popped up that this Z-Wave thing was looking for an executive director. I'm thinking, all right, I'll bite. So I sent in my latest CV, and literally the next morning, I got a phone call from a guy named Avi Rosenthal, some of you may know, and he's like, "You're kidding? You want this job?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Should I?" And this kind of goes back and forth. And ultimately, he said, "Yeah, the board is making their decision this Thursday." And this, of course, was like a Tuesday. So very quickly, I interviewed with a bunch of different people, but the real decision maker in this one was the one that advocated for me most. And that, of course, is none other than Janet Collins. And she'll tell you this day that she's the one that got me the job with the Z-Wave Alliance. And to expand on that just a little bit, the reason I got the job was, yes, of course, of the network, and I knew all these people in the integration business. But the reason I got it was because I didn't know engineering. I was not a software guy, and all I could do was spell Z-Wave, not an engineer. And the issue with a lot of these organizations, let's just take Zigbee as an example, is that they're led by technical people and don't quite understand the market, the go-to-market, and the value of what they have. It's a long story. I'm sorry, it's a long-winded answer. But once I came on board with Z-Wave, it became pretty clear to me because, I didn't need to know the technology. I just needed to know what is better about it and how to go to market with it. It was pretty awesome stuff. And now you know. So that's kind of the quick story.
That is certainly a full-on story, and it was quite enjoyable actually. And it's kind of interesting to hear that story because when you put it in a marketing position versus an engineering position, you start understanding some of the reasons behind some of the key messages. And there's one thing in my mind that Z-Wave says a lot, and I think it's a very powerful message, and that's one of interoperability. Mm-hmm. But people have different views on what interoperability actually means. So maybe you could explain what interoperability means from the Z-Wave mindset.
Yeah, this was the thing the most fun to kind of play with because just, I didn't go through my background before URC, but I used to own and operate my own installation company way back, way back. I'm not going to give you years, but I had a team of 35 people that was designing and installing stuff in people's homes, typically entertainment focused, but certainly with technology as well. I forgot the question. Anyway, yeah.
The questions regarding the marketing insight regarding interoperability. I like the way that Z-Wave does this, and maybe you could expand on that.
Yes, I certainly can expand on that. So the important thing for an integrator is choice. And the reason it's important for choice is because there are certain biases, whatever that happens to be. And integrators are dealing directly with homeowners, and homeowners have their preferences. And so when you talk about putting stuff in a client's home, the aesthetic is a very important piece of what you're doing. And I always use door locks as an example, because if all you can use is one particular door lock, one size fits all never works when you're talking about installation in a home. Business, corporate, smart cities, perhaps, but in a home, no. So the way I always like to use the interoperability example is to say, in the front door, you're going to want a Baldwin lock because the Baldwins are high-level finish, top-of-the-line look. But for the basement entry, you may find that the Kwikset is the right thing. We like the Dana lock on the back door, and so on and so forth. And the idea is you can mix and match, and you can still have a single button that says good night, and all the locks work together. That's what interoperability is. Interoperability is if you want to put whole home lighting in your house, there's no one brand that's going to have every solution you need, right? So you have the opportunity, maybe one little widget that might solve a specific use case in one specific room that can be added in. And it also was a real benefit in terms of building an ecosystem so that if you're a startup or an early stage company and you come up with this cool widget, and I had this one company in mind that built in a really cool gadget for lamps. He doesn't have to build an entire line of lighting devices in order to sell his little widget. He can just build the widget, and he can be part of a huge ecosystem and be a solution problem or a solution to a problem, I should say, for an integrator. And that's a really enormous opportunity for manufacturers, developers, installers, as well as end users. That's what interoperability is all about, without the worry of will this work with.
I think that's a fair statement because, of course, being the nerd I am and whatnot, I certainly have a lot of home automation in my home. And I do know that the aesthetics of the company that I may buy those products from may not line up with the aesthetics that I want in my home. So yes, certainly interoperability in that mindset is a fantastic offering for the consumer. But how do you do that from an engineering point of view? Because if you think about it, back in, I guess it's the November timeframe 2020, Z-Wave Alliance brought out a new milestone, the Z-Wave long range aspect. How do you maintain interoperability, and what does that mean when you think about Z-Wave Mesh and Z-Wave long range? How does all that continue to happen?
That is a great question. And if you talk with an engineer and you tell them, no, you have to make sure the project you're working on is backwards compatible, they're not happy about that. Because I guess at the base level, it could potentially mean you can't really implement what you want. But the reality is you can. So let's talk about that for a second. What made Z-Wave very deployable, shall I say, in consumers' homes, which, by the way, is the same thing as Zigbee, is the fact of being able to use a mesh setup. So in order to get from point A to point B, if it's going to be too long, and the best example, again, going back to door locks, where the exterior door lock may be just far enough away from the hub that it's not consistently responding to your commands. So you need to add a device in the middle, and that essentially works as a repeater. And again, we all know this. This is pretty common in terms of Z-Wave and Zigbee. But the limitation there has always been distance. Now, Z-Wave has always led in distance because of the sub-gig PHYs that are being used. So when you look at an example I'll give you is with Wi-Fi, and ask people if they're happy with the Wi-Fi in their home, often they're saying no because it doesn't work in certain parts of the home. And that's because the physics behind a 2.4 gigahertz sine wave, it can get lost by the time it goes through a couple of walls. Just simply won't get there, whereas sub-gig will. But we still want to get to the edge of the property. There are still use cases that have not been addressed. And leave it to the team of folks that we have, Silicon Labs, that we have in Copenhagen. They did a really great job. One of our customers basically came up to us with a problem and wanted us to solve it. I won't get into the details on that, but we had to solve it, and that had to do with distance. And so leave it to the guys in Copenhagen. They basically started working on it, found out that they could get the distance much greater than they could within the city of Copenhagen. So the guys put the stuff on a boat, went out to a remote island, and started basically driving around on the island, all the cows looking at them going, what the heck? And basically came up with what we're calling Z-Wave long range, which they tested to exceed 1 mile in ideal conditions, which actually goes more than that. Now, how does that work in terms of backwards compatibility? Well, it's a tweak on the PHY, an addition on the PHY. But now you have, at least on the Scilabs 700, you have the opportunity to run both mesh as well as long range. So when devices become included, which is the Z-Wave term, or commissioned, which is the more common term, the process of commissioning will determine whether the device is going to come on in a mesh or is going to come on in a star topology, which would be the long range. And as you can imagine, that means this device is fully backwards compatible. So that 20-year-old dimmer that you have on the wall will continue to work even when you have Z-Wave long range. And that's always been a commitment, is to be able to be backwards compatible, interoperable, and of course, innovative at the same time.
And if a device comes up as a long-range device or is commissioned into the network as a long-range device, the network controller, the gateway, whatever that might be, can actually jump the signal between the two types of topology. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, that means, the controller, of course, has to be, long range capable. But I should say, and any 700 device can be updated to include long range.
Because it's all software based.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. And so the 700 series is really the device, the single chip, the SoC, however you want to refer to it, but it's the single device that you're recommending that developers pick up and use today. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So what do they have? What tools do they have to kind of get started with the 700 series?
Basically, go to the Silicon Labs website, of course, and order a kit and get started with a kit. There's all kinds of documentation off the Silicon Labs website. And within the developer's kit, you also get some testing capabilities. Actually, there's even been changes in the certification whereby you can go through the alliance and do the self-testing, before you even submit products into testing. But in between the process of thinking you want to do it to getting certified, go to the Silicon Labs site, order yourself a kit, a dev kit. They're actually pretty inexpensive compared to what they used to be, and get started with it.
The certification program that you mentioned, I'm assuming you're using that to help ensure the interoperability, backward compatibility, and such the like in products, such that the end consumers basically make the win here. Is that the reason for certification?
Absolutely, and there's another thing that we also need to add to that, and that is the security. A very important piece of the certification is to ensure that what we're calling S2 security has been implemented properly so that every single device, whether it's an access device, a passive sensor, everything has the proper security included in the device itself. Security is important.
And security going forward, I'm assuming you're building on that theme, ensuring backward compatibility, but meeting all the new demands that are placed on devices. Is that true?
Yeah, of course. The backwards compatibility piece means if you buy a brand new device and you have an old system, the security will default to the existing security that the hub is capable of providing. But just to go back there, I want to touch on that for a second, because I've been with Z-Wave long enough to make the statement that it has never been hacked. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there going, oh, yeah? Okay, it's been hacked in a laboratory? Of course it has. It's been hacked in certain test cases? Yes. We have responded to that. But I can tell you, when you go back as far as you want and look at any cases where a home system has been hacked, it's never been a Z-Wave system.
The reality of it is, though, is the intent of those security labs is to hack and help organizations like the Z-Wave Alliance understand the shortcomings so that they can close those holes. I mean, what you may have had as a hole in the past may not exist today. I'm assuming that's the case.
Exactly right. And yeah, we have definitely had companies reach out to us and say, hey, we found a vulnerability. But nevertheless, we took that very, very seriously and we've addressed it. So yeah, we're way ahead of the pack on that. And by the way, that is why the security industry itself has always been a huge supporter of Z-Wave. I mean, you can't name a security system that doesn't have Z-Wave in it. Every one of them has it. Maybe some lower cost ones may not, but again, all the professional ones, 90% of the professional security systems have Z-Wave implemented.
I was aware that the security industry falls onto Z-Wave quite heavily, so it's nice for you to point that out. I appreciate that. Mitch, we are kind of out of time here, and if I keep talking, Carl's going to find out we did this podcast. So I think we're going to have to close it down, but I think we've raised enough topics here that we should maybe do another one of these sessions and just pick on some aspects to open them up and dive in a little bit more. Would you be open to that in the future?
Of course, and you know where I am.
This is true. Okay, well, thank you everybody for turning up, and thank you, Mitch. It was great to hear your input on the evolution of Z-Wave. Everybody, thanks again. Feel free to sign up for more of these podcasts as we move forward. And in the interim, take care. Thanks again.